Persian Gulf, 65 nautical miles northeast of Bahrain. 8 in the morning, 12 Iranian fighter jets streaked across the sky at high altitude, while 15 fast attack boats sped across the water below, and both groups were closing on USS Abraham Lincoln from different directions. Iran was launching an all-out attack on the carrier. The 12 jets carried anti-ship missiles and were approaching from 4 directions, while at the same time the 15 boats armed with rockets and machine guns were coming from the northeast. Iran's plan was simple. They believed they could overwhelm American defenses by attacking from air and sea simultaneously. The Iranian attack launched at 7:30 with precise coordination between air and naval forces. 12 jets took off from 3 different air bases across southern Iran within a 5-minute window, assembling into attack formation before turning toward the carrier. At the same time, 15 fast boats departed from 3 coastal bases, timing their departure to reach attack range when the jets launched their missiles. The 12 jets carried a total of 20 anti-ship missiles that would be launched simultaneously from maximum range. The missiles were programmed to approach from different altitudes and directions, creating a saturation attack designed to overwhelm the carrier defenses. The 15 boats carried RPG rocket launchers, heavy machine guns mounted on pedestals, and hand grenades. These weapons were designed for close-range attacks, requiring the boats to close within 2 miles of the carrier before opening fire. The boat crews understood this was extremely dangerous, but had orders to press the attack regardless of losses. Iranian commanders had assured their forces that the coordinated attack would succeed in hitting the carrier, even if most attacking vehicles were destroyed. They characterized the mission as demonstrating Iranian capability, showing that American carriers operating near Iranian waters were vulnerable to determined attacks. At 7:50, radar operators aboard USS Abraham Lincoln detected both threats simultaneously on their displays. The screen showed 12 hostile aircraft 180 miles northwest, flying at 25,000 feet and heading directly toward the carrier. And at the same time, 15 hostile boats appeared 45 miles northeast, traveling at high speed from Iranian coastal waters. Within seconds, defensive systems throughout the carrier strike group were alerted. Automated data links transmitted complete threat information to every ship and aircraft in the battle group. Every radar screen and weapon system now showed the same picture: 12 hostile aircraft and 15 hostile boats converging on the carrier from different directions. The carrier air wing commander received the threat data and immediately ordered 8 Super Hornets flying combat air patrol to intercept the Iranian jets. At the same time, 2 helicopters launched from the deck to engage surface threats. Warships maneuvered to position themselves between the fast boats and the carrier. The carrier strike group commander monitored the situation from the Combat Information Center, and he had been expecting Iranian provocation based on intelligence reports. What surprised him was the coordination between air and surface attacks, which showed more sophistication than Iran had demonstrated in previous operations. Clear orders were issued throughout the defensive network. Engage all threats at maximum range. Prioritize aircraft since they pose the more immediate danger, and ensure every Iranian vehicle was destroyed before it could fire its weapons. The rules of combat authorized defensive action against any hostile forces approaching in attack formations, and commanders had no hesitation about applying those rules. The Super Hornets climbed to 35,000 feet and accelerated toward the Iranian jets, closing at combined speeds exceeding 500 miles per hour. The American pilots activated their radars and began tracking individual Iranian aircraft, assigning targets through data systems that connected all 8 fighters into a coordinated network. At 50 miles from the Iranian formation, the lead American pilot received authorization to engage. He immediately selected 2 Iranian jets and fired 2 long-range missiles. The missiles dropped from his aircraft and accelerated to 4 times the speed of sound. The other pilots followed within seconds, launching their own missiles at additional targets. 12 American missiles streaked toward the Iranian formation. The Iranian pilots detected the launches on their warning systems and realized they were under attack. Though they had expected to get much closer before being engaged, the reality of being targeted from 50 miles away left them with very little time to react. The Iranian formation leader transmitted a warning to his pilots, ordering them to deploy defensive countermeasures and begin evasive maneuvers. Following his orders, the jets began releasing chaff, small metal strips designed to create false radar returns. But the countermeasures were largely ineffective against the sophisticated American missiles tracking them. The first American missile struck an Iranian jet 40 miles from the carrier. The warhead detonated when it passed within 10 meters, sending fragments through the jet wing and fuselage at hypersonic velocity. Hydraulic lines severed, fuel tanks ruptured, and flight control computers were destroyed. The pilot lost control immediately as his aircraft began rolling uncontrollably. He pulled the ejection handle and fired clear seconds before the jet entered a fatal spin. A second Iranian jet was struck by a missile that detonated directly against the cockpit area, killing both crew members instantly. The aircraft disintegrated in midair and fell into the ocean. Within the next 30 seconds, 4 more Iranian jets were hit in rapid succession. One took a direct hit on its left engine, the explosion severing the engine and causing catastrophic wing damage. The pilot attempted to maintain control, but the aircraft entered an unrecoverable spin and crashed before he could eject. Another jet was struck by 2 missiles almost simultaneously, one from above and one from below. The combined explosions broke the aircraft's spine and it fell apart in midair. The pilot managed to eject from the forward section, but his weapons officer was trapped and went down with the wreckage. 2 Iranian jets were heavily damaged but remained airborne, their pilots struggling to control crippled aircraft. One had lost most of its left wing to missile fragments and was descending in a shallow spiral. The other had suffered engine damage and was losing altitude while trailing smoke. The coordinated Iranian attack formation fell apart completely as aircraft scattered in all directions, some diving while others climbed desperately. But there was no escape from the American fighters that continued pressing the attack with systematic precision. The surviving Iranian pilots attempted various escape maneuvers. 2 strike aircraft, heavy and slow compared to the fighters, dove to low altitude and accelerated to maximum speed. These jets were designed for bombing rather than air combat, and they lacked the performance to evade modern missiles. American weapons tracked them despite their maneuvers and struck both within seconds of each other. Both jets exploded in massive fireballs as their fuel loads ignited. Neither pilot survived. 3 Iranian fighters attempted escape by flying at extremely low altitude where ocean surface clutter might interfere with missile tracking. The pilots flew barely 100 feet above the waves, staying as close to the water as possible. This tactic showed skill and training, but technology overcame their efforts. 2 of these low-flying jets were struck by missiles that tracked through the clutter and detonated despite the difficult environment. One pilot ejected successfully before his aircraft hit the water at 600 miles per hour. The other went down with his jet, unable to eject before impact. The third low-flying jet managed to evade 2 separate missile attacks through aggressive maneuvering combined with perfectly timed chaff deployment. The pilot was clearly experienced and knew exactly when to release countermeasures for maximum effect. He appeared to be escaping when an American fighter closed to within 10 miles and fired a short-range heat-seeking missile. This missile tracked the jet engine exhaust rather than relying on radar, making it impossible to decoy with chaff. The weapon struck from behind, destroying both engines with a single hit. With no power, the pilot had no choice but to eject. He parachuted into the ocean where he would later be recovered by Iranian helicopters. One final Iranian jet survived longer than the others through extreme low-altitude flight and expert defensive flying. He successfully evaded 3 separate missile attacks, each time using hard turns, chaff, and altitude changes to break tracking. He was clearly the most skilled pilot in the formation. But when 2 American fighters maneuvered to cut off his escape to Iranian airspace, skill alone could not save him. Rather than fire more missiles that the pilot might evade, one American pilot decided to close to gun range and destroy the jet with cannon fire. The American pilot maneuvered behind and below the Iranian aircraft, positioning for a tail shot while his wingman flew high cover. He closed to within 3,000 feet and opened fire with his 20mm cannon. The gun fired 100 rounds per second, and even a short burst sent hundreds of rounds toward the target. Approximately 50 rounds struck the Iranian jet tail section and rear fuselage. The high-explosive shells detonated on impact, causing catastrophic structural damage. The tail section separated from the fuselage, making controlled flight impossible. The aircraft tumbled out of control and crashed into the ocean at high speed. The pilot attempted to eject, but the violent motion prevented safe ejection, and he did not survive. At 8:10, all 12 Iranian jets had been destroyed. Not a single Iranian aircraft launched its anti-ship missiles. The air threat was eliminated. Meanwhile, the 15 Iranian fast boats were speeding toward the carrier across open water. The boats were small fiberglass vessels about 40 feet long, painted in blue-gray camouflage. Each carried 8 to 10 crew members armed with RPG rocket launchers, heavy machine guns, and grenades. The crews wore life jackets and combat gear, knowing they were heading into extremely dangerous waters. The boats approached from multiple directions in a swarming tactic, maintaining 40-knot speeds and creating large wakes as they bounced across the moderate sea state. Boat commanders communicated through handheld radios, coordinating their approach so all 15 vessels would reach attack range simultaneously. The Iranian plan called for the boats to close to within 2 miles before opening fire with rocket launchers. At that range, the RPG-7 rockets they carried would be marginally effective against the carrier hull, though unlikely to cause critical damage. The real goal was demonstrating that Iranian forces could reach and attack an American carrier. At 15 miles from the carrier, American warships opened fire with rapid-fire cannons. The 76mm guns fired high explosive shells at 120 rounds per minute with computer-controlled aiming, each shell capable of destroying a small boat with a single hit. The first salvo created massive waterspouts around the Iranian boats as rounds impacted near their targets. Gunners adjusted aim, walking fire onto targets while automated systems calculated lead angles for the fast-moving boats. The second salvo scored hits with 3 shells striking the lead boat. The boat disintegrated in a massive explosion as shells detonated against its fiberglass hull. Fuel tanks ruptured and ignited, creating a fireball that consumed the entire vessel and killed the entire crew. The burning wreckage continued forward briefly before slowing and sinking. 2 helicopters launched from the carrier and flew at 500 feet toward the Iranian formation. Door gunners manned machine guns while pilots prepared to fire rockets from pods mounted on the helicopter sides. The helicopters engaged from above, firing down at boats that had no defense against aerial attack. One pilot fired 4 rockets at a cluster of 3 boats traveling close together. The rockets struck near the boats, creating pressure waves that damaged hulls and threw crew members overboard. One boat took a direct rocket hit that penetrated the thin hull and exploded inside, killing everyone aboard and sinking the vessel within seconds. The helicopter door gunner then engaged survivors in the water with machine gun fire, following rules that classified anyone from attacking boats as continuing threats. A second helicopter engaged additional boats with machine gun fire. The 7.62mm rounds punched through fiberglass hulls, striking engines, fuel tanks, and crew members. 3 boats were disabled, their engines destroyed or crews killed, leaving them dead in the water. The Iranian boats that survived the initial defensive fire continued pressing forward with remarkable determination. Commanders maintained course toward the carrier despite watching comrades' boats being destroyed around them. At 8 miles from the carrier, 6 boats remained operational and still closing at high speed. Warship machine guns shifted fire to these surviving threats, engaging each with multiple rounds. One boat was struck by 5 shells in rapid succession and was torn apart completely. At 5 miles, the carrier-owned defensive guns engaged, firing thousands of 20mm rounds per minute and creating streams of tracers that appeared as solid lines reaching toward the approaching threats. Fire control systems assigned each gun to specific targets, ensuring every Iranian boat was engaged by at least one weapon. The concentrated firepower was devastating, with boats struck by dozens of rounds within seconds and disintegrating under impact. 4 boats were destroyed between 5 and 2 miles range, their burning hulks marking the outer defensive perimeter. The remaining boats attempted to scatter in different directions, hoping splitting up might allow some to survive. But helicopters and warship machine guns continued engaging them systematically. 2 boats were hit by helicopter rockets at close range. The explosions flipped the lightweight vessels completely over and threw crew members high into the air. Both sank immediately with no survivors. The final 3 boats represented the most determined attackers, their commanders refusing to turn away despite watching every other boat destroyed. They reached within 1 mile before being engaged by multiple weapon systems from both the carrier and nearby warships. All 3 were hit and destroyed within 10 seconds, struck by shells and thousands of rounds from defensive systems. The concentrated fire was so intense the boats literally disintegrated, leaving only floating debris to mark where they had been. The entire surface combat lasted 12 minutes from first detection to the last boat being destroyed, and all 15 Iranian boats were destroyed without firing a single weapon at the carrier. The combined air and surface combat lasted 20 minutes total. Iranian forces had attacked with 12 fighter jets carrying 20 anti-ship missiles and 15 fast boats carrying rockets and machine guns. All 27 Iranian vehicles were destroyed. None had been able to fire their weapons at the carrier. American casualties: 0 personnel killed or wounded, 0 aircraft damaged, 0 ships damaged. Iranian casualties: estimated 168 killed, including 90 boat crew members and 18 fighter pilots. 8 Iranian pilots were recovered from the water and later returned to Iranian custody through diplomatic channels. The Abraham Lincoln Carrier Group resumed normal operations within 30 minutes of the combat conclusion.